Welcome to my review of Mrs Lowry and Son and my retro review of Attack of the Clones. 1930s industrial Pendlebury, England. A bleak existence for many, but for one man, the mundane held the bustling rhythm of life. Compelled to paint the miracle he observed, one domineering figure in his life assured him his aspiration as artist was for naught. Endlessly critical, shielding him from failure. 'Twas a tumultuous relationship between Mrs Lowry and Son. First impressions of the film was that it was a privilege to be so close to an artist on the cusp of success. It was a privilege to be so close to some renowned performers, being Vanessa Redgrave and Timothy Spall, close quarters with such unusual characters. Something, maybe a bit of a paradox I might mention here is that it's possible that the film wouldn't have been made without Redgrave and Spall, I'm not sure. And their fine and detailed performances are really professional performances. But a couple of times I couldn't unsee how charismatic and, you know, how energetic they were in their eyes, and I didn't anticipate that those characters would actually be like that in real life, but perhaps they were. I don't really know. Fine performances, a great comparison here, and may I point out that I was caught off guard by some of the naive CGI used to depict the backgrounds of a lot of these industrial scenes, but it turns out that they were styled as per Lowry's more famous paintings. It's a great choice for a director to make. I'll mention here as well in terms of performance that I think, generally speaking, actors are extroverted physically to be on stage, to be in front of a camera. Painters, fine artists are not, you know, generally speaking, and that's a difficult thing to capture. Lowry's father was a diminutive presence by all accounts, and he died of pneumonia just before the time that this film was set. He left them in debt, and they required a move here to Pendlebury. Now Lowry is somewhat isolated in this phase of his life. His mother is entirely dependent on him. He was a rent collector during this period, and not as a job, not a great platform for happy social engagement. His mother was intensely critical of his aspirations as artist, as was her father of her, I've read. Mrs Lowry was a teacher and a fine pianist with concert ambitions unfulfilled. She has so little regard and some disdain for her son's ambition. Michael Begley here and June Watson are from the stage version of the play. Martin Hesford wrote the radio stage and screenplay, and we should point out here that Hesford lived around the corner apparently from Lowry during this phase of his life. We should point out that there are certain sensibilities from radio, stage or play that need to be tended to bring out the most powerful effect from each of those mediums. The voice and the unfettered imagination of radio, the physical immediacy and the stagecraft of the stage, and the ability to be extremely close or extremely far and anywhere in between with the cinema camera, and the ability to manipulate time with cinema. These things have to be played with in order to extract the most out of each of those mediums. The cinematographer here was Joseph M. Sievert, with a great pedigree in docos and TV and more recently feature films. They used an Arri Alexa Mini which makes sense. These Zeiss Master Primes, but a small film production in an enclosed area, you'd want to choose the smaller cameras. I've included a picture of the sound recordist according to Internet Movie Database, Dave Ratcliffe, because I don't pay enough attention to the sound recording in movies. In this film you had the sound recordist on set and the boom operator. Then afterwards you have a Foley artist and a Foley recording technician. Then you have the sound mixing technician and the supervising sound editor. So there's a lot of people required to bring a small commercial feature to completion in the sound department. And you don't talk about the sound aspect of the film as much as perhaps you should. Now I counted about 35 people in this crew shot, which I pinched from the cinematographer's Facebook page. Adrian Noble, coming from stage theatre direction, is in the middle with a clapperboard. But 35 people is probably about right for a small commercial feature. It's definitely massive for a no budget or a low budget film, which I've had the privilege of having been involved in, and it's certainly tiny by tentpole commercial feature crews. Thanks to everyone for giving us the privilege of looking into Lowry's life. I think Adrian Noble as a director walked a line between the stage version and the theatre production, the stage version and Lowry's paintings in this. And that's, you know, an interesting choice to make and a step to take. And he promoted Lowry worldwide to new people like myself. Thank you. Single events can be determined the tipping points to eras of suffering and brutality. Impotence of a prophetic power, irrepressible, forbidden love, a splintering democracy, a great sage confounded, an awakening in the eye of a storm, and so inevitable it was, the attack of the clones. Key characters in the Star Wars saga, but just one of many characters in Attack of the Clones. Difficult role for the accomplished Portman, and Bird more so was Christensen under the weight of Darth Vader. Their commitment to their roles pays off, more so in Revenge of the Sith. Here in Attack of the Clones, the plot still seems to be driven by that certain phantom menace we saw in episode 1, still pulling the strings. But has my perspective been tainted by the last film in the series, which I recently watched, Rise of Skywalker? Now, there are cracking action sequences for every plot thread in this movie, and more. There's a lot of action. Coruscant has the opening action sequence. Camino effectively has 2 action sequences. Tatooine is a small but pivotal action sequence. And there are 4, no less than 4 action sequences for Geonosis, and they keep the plot and the tempo bubbling along. Very occasionally we're removed from the action due to unnatural computer-generated physical movement, but definitely computer-generated imagery and special effects have progressed since episode 1. The CGI is more dynamic and synchronised with the performers, expanding essentially the reach of the galaxy in Attack of the Clones. Now, there are fewer cool ships and devices and more world building in Attack of the Clones. This is Obi-Wan's ship that he uses to reach Camino, and I'd like to mention here that Obi-Wan reminded me of Richard Chamberlain from King Solomon's Mines in Ewan McGregor's Beard, and Ken Marshall as Colwyn. And who's that? It's Colwyn from Kroll. The opening title crawl for Attack of the Clones is less convoluted than The Phantom Menace, but the actual story here seems to have a revelation every line of dialogue. That's exaggerating slightly. Now, such a pivotal role, but who the heck is Cypher Diaz? Now, I did find the answer on an official Star Wars website. A couple of interesting characters who we're very familiar with, and they're present throughout the prequels, but they're not recognised in the original trilogy. In hindsight, better connective tissue for these prequels would have been C-3PO as narrator for The Phantom Menace, in delivering a lecture to young Jedi Padawans at a Jedi college for Attack of the Clones. Leia is delivering a lecture for graduates at the Jedi University. Stay with me. And Luke, for Revenge of the Sith, is delivering a presentation to the Galactic War Museum. Now let's feel that emotional connection through characters that we have an emotional connection with. It's a good idea in hindsight, but the payoff for the sequel trilogy would have been huge. So back to Lars's homestead for the first time. It doesn't feel as powerful as it should because it's only one story among many. The empathy that we feel for Anakin is diminished because he's seemingly invincible. We know his fate. Our lack of attachment is similar with Padme and Obi-Wan. To have it told by Luke and Leia as a narration and seeing their emotions, as I've said, as they tell this personal story to them, would have had, I feel, a greater impact. But Lucas has built a tale of galactic political intrigue and deception and warmongering, and he's truly expanded the universe. Some of the painstaking work involved in creating the CGI special effects and creatures. Our heroic trio, face off against 3 new creatures in an arena battle. The work behind the scenes in casting these 3 creatures is very interesting, and it's immense. Now, Lucas may have refrained from developing that sense of precariousness about the very lives of our heroic trio because of the rating of the film. It's just an idea. Now, the world building with the special effects continues for Coruscant, Naboo and Tatooine, and it extends to Kamino and Geonosis. And there's always something familiar about each of the new planets, but something different, something fantastic. This is the first phase of the climactic battle sequence, and it's great to see a bunch of Jedis going at it. They were largely just regular warriors with lightsaber skills, but Yoda does reveal throughout the story that the influence of the Jedi is waning, and they almost perish here. The immense scale of the battle is realised, perhaps at the expense of a deep emotional connection, which I've touched on already, but the thrilling CGI work, it gets the pulse up. How is it that little Yoda has a power far, far beyond any of his cohorts? Lip service is paid to this connection at the film's end, but again the trade-off is a greater sense of the Phantom Menace's reach into the galaxy's expanse. It's an epic film. It's an epic film. You know, it can't be denied. My gripe, I think it's time to sort out the sound in Star Wars. We can hear a ship as it roars by in outer space. Shouldn't be able to. We hear a single vehicle's engine as it buzzes by on Coruscant. But we can't hear the drone of the endless, busy, crisscrossing lattice of traffic on Coruscant. perhaps explain it away by having it extremely loud outside, but once you get inside, the suppression of the noise is so advanced you don't hear anything. Just a gripe. Thanks for listening to my review. Please leave some comments if you're interested and able. I'd be happy to respond, and see you next time. I've dabbled in no budget short and feature films. I've never made a feature film. I couldn't hold a candle to anyone I've criticised in these reviews.